Get started in a few minutes, so kind of give you a heads up. If you do want to move to the front, great. There will be some information shared up on the screen that may be a little small in the back. So make yourselves comfortable. Just wanted to give you a heads up.
My name is Kelly Wachel, and I am the new Executive Director of Public Relations for Lake Summit School District. And once again, thank you for being here. We've had great participation all week and ready for our fourth evening of the first engagement series. And with that, I want to introduce our superintendent, Dr. Dennis Carpenter, who's up first. Dr. Carpenter.
How are you all on this lovely evening? Wonderful. Count me in. I'm wonderful too. We picked a great week to have a community engagement series. I think going into the winter months, this is probably the most beautiful week of the year to be on the inside. So we'll see if we're that lucky in October and November when we ask you all to come out again. I'll tell you, this is night 4 of giving the community information around this notion of comprehensive facilities master planning. And the more I engage, the more excited I get because I see so many possibilities for young kids across our entire school district. Now, when you've seen this information, raise your hand if you're kind of on par. You've been keeping up with the information as it's coming out from the district. Thank you all. We're working extremely hard to make certain that you see the information. We're working extremely hard to keep you abreast. We built the website. You'll hear more about that tonight. Some of you have already been on it. But what I want to offer is, this is a two-pronged process. Prong number 1, and probably the one that gets you thinking a lot, is the notion of boundaries and how do we deal with the issue of capacity and our students in the school district. But I'm going to invite you to get excited with me about this notion of defining learning spaces going into the future for our students. We all know that we're preparing our students for their futures and not our yesterdays. With that being said, that entails jobs that have not even been invented. So how do we, as a community, prepare our kids for that reality? And a big part of it has to do with this convergence between curriculum and instruction, what we teach and how we teach, and the spaces we allow our kids to be served in. So I want you to miss that notion as we go about this work this evening. We have a mission in this district, and it's pretty clear. It's to prepare each student for success in life. Doesn't say some students. Doesn't say students in a certain corridor of our district. It says each student for success in life. And through this possibility or this opportunity, we're going to get to shape the future of our schools. If this thing goes according to plan, I can see us with a plan in place that talks about what we teach, how we teach it, what the space looks like and feels like across our district for the next 5 to 10 years. That's exciting. Our board has entrusted us as an administrative team with this work. We have a couple of our board members in the audience this evening. I think we have about 3 of them. And they've done it by way of their priorities. They've identified 3 key priorities for this superintendent and this administration over the course of this year. Priority number 1, increasing student achievement by way of innovative practices and by way of monitoring and keeping a good, keen eye on the well-being of our students. I'm going to go a little bit off script right now. I'm super excited about this notion of a student advisory council. And maybe some of you in this room, your children have signed up to be a part of that group. And I had 93 applications from students across grades 7 through 12 to be a part of the Superintendent's Advisory Council. No way I can manage 93. You talk about a class size problem. I'd have a class size problem. But I'm going through and I'm watching the videos and I'm really trying to find the heart of our young people and what do they want for our community. And man, I hear lots of them. They want positivity across the organization. They want everybody valued and appreciated. I mean, these young kids, they get it. But it's one piece that saddens me. Many of the 93 applicants talk about this notion of stress and anxiety. Many of them talk about this notion of stress and anxiety. And it made my heart sad. Because I have to wonder, as the leader of this system, how much do we do in a place called school to perpetuate that? And what we're going to talk about related to facilities and spaces and how we have kids getting excited about learning and answering real-world problems and the like, we can ease some of that if we have the courage as a community to do so. Also, equity in our program design and implementation. If you follow me on Twitter, you know I'm Equity Suit 1. It's the road I came in on, it's the road I'm going to go out on. What is equity? It's making sure that every kid in every situation gets what he or she needs to be successful. And that does not matter if you're in the school that's the lowest free and reduced lunch in our community at Longview Farm, or if you're in the highest, at least some in elementary school. You deserve to get what you need to be successful. And that's the definition of equity, and that's what we will put forth in this program, Design and Delivery. Also, that word equity comes up again in priority number 2, equitable access to future-ready learning environments. By further engaging our stakeholders in processes like the one we're involved in this evening to develop a comprehensive facilities master plan. And let's think broadly, let's imagine, because once we've imagined and we find out what's best for our young people, then we can get into aligning our fiscal resources. And yes, we may have to get into this notion of school district boundaries. We may have to get into that notion of the boundaries of our school district as we look at all we can do in grades pre-K through 12. And the final priority, elevating communication. Raise your hands if you fill out the survey. That was a communication opportunity to talk about this particular work. There will be more. We're going to introduce another platform called Thought Exchange, in which you can put forth your thoughts and then you can score the thoughts of others. If you think it's a one-star thought or you think it's a 5-star thought. That's coming also relative to the questions of comprehensive facilities master planning, but trying to engage you all in interconnected communication, and thank you for being here in that regard. So if I were to issue a challenge today, I'd inspire each of you to envision the future of what our schools can look like for all young people. And we can do this together. One thing that I've heard during the week, and I'm like, there's no way in the world we take 12 days over the course of 3.5 months, 12 nights away from families and away from spouses and kids, if the plan's already developed. But there's some people out there that believe you've already done it, you're just bringing us in here just to play a game. Well, I'd much rather be playing what I was doing a few minutes ago, which was tic-tac-toe with my 6-year-old, versus playing a game here. Folks, we don't have a plan. I told somebody, if you believe we have a plan, there it is. Blank slide. That's the plan. Because we have an opportunity to imagine this together. And I encourage you all to walk with us during this process. And when we do it, as I think about the 93 applications, as I think about more than half talking about anxiety and stress levels and the like, let's think from the notion of those folks. Let's do this work with students at the center as a community. And I'm certain that we're going to land in a good place. Thank you all for being here. I appreciate your time this evening.
Thank you, Dr. Culver. Good evening, everyone. My name is Scott Pasha, and I'm with DLR Group. We're excited to be here to participate in this process as well. I want to mention several other partners that we have with us. Along with the community in the district, we're working with Gould Evans and Link Strategic Partnerships and Applied Economics. All of us are working together to come together with this notion of comprehensive facility master plan. DLR Group and Gould Evans both have national expertise in future-ready learning, so we're excited to share that experience with you as we look at your community and see how we can enhance the learning environments in your school. Before I go further, I want to just give you a brief glimpse at what the agenda is for this evening. So we're going to be sharing information with you. We're going to have dialogue, comment cards. Hopefully you grab one on your way in. We want you to fill those out because that will directly inform our discussion with you this evening. We'll spend a little bit of time up front talking about the Comprehensive Facility Master Plan. What is it? The question's been asked, why are we doing it now? So both members from the district and myself will talk a little bit about what that process is all about. We'll move into this notion of future-ready learning as well, and hopefully spell out a little bit better of what that means and why it's important to each and every student in the district. The district will also share some of the current work that's going on with instruction and how that influences and impacts that notion of future-ready learning. Then we'll dive into lay of the land. During this part, we'll talk specifically about existing demographics within the district, projections of future enrollment trends, and development within various areas in the district. And hopefully that gives you some base data to start with as we start to look at capacity and how schools are occupied. At that point, we'll transition into the community feedback component and the kind of discussion that we'll have. We'll have a panel up front and directly answer the questions that you have shared with us this evening. So that is a large part of the community conversation. At the close of that, we'll give everyone the opportunity. We have some boards set up out in front. I noticed many of you have been looking at those already. But we call this gallery walk, and it'll be a more kind of one-on-one opportunity for you to ask specific questions from the design team from the district as well. So we appreciate you coming out again tonight and look forward to our interaction this evening. So let's talk a little bit about comprehensive facility master plan. I'm going to ask Kyle Burrell from the school district, he's director of facilities, to come up and just spend a little bit of time to talk about what is a comprehensive facility master plan and why are we doing it.
Good evening. So what I'd like to do is give just a quick explanation of why we're going through this process right now and why it's important that we look at future-ready learning along with the notion of building capacity across the district. The old model of how and the model right now of how we determine capacity in our buildings, it's purely based on students in seats. How many kids can we get into a classroom with a number of seats? But what that model doesn't do is it doesn't take into account what the students' needs are for collaboration, for comfort, for flexibility, for making choice about their learning environments. It is a quantitative method of determining capacity. So what we are longing for here is a qualitative method where we can determine the right quality of space that's needed for that educational environment. So that can take more space, it can take less space. We really don't know, but what we do know is that kids need collaboration, they need to make some choice about their learning, they need to be comfortable to learn, and that the capacity and future-ready learning, they need to be talked about together so we can make good decisions on how many kids should be assigned to different buildings in the district. So we know that a lot of people are wanting to hear about capacity, and we just want you to know that we really do appreciate your time and letting us just talk through what future-ready learning means, why it's important, why it's going to truly foundationally make a difference in this district for all the kids and how they learn. Thank you very much.
So the comprehensive facility master plan also serves as a roadmap. And I think that's really one of the main reasons that any district would take this opportunity to look into the future 5-10 years. As we plan moving forward, what opportunities do we have? What problems do we need to address? So as we started meeting and having discussions with the district and the comprehensive facility master plan team, we started talking about what issues are out there. How can we define opportunities? So as we started looking at this list, we really started to be able to categorize them in 3 categories. Oh, and by the way, this presentation will be available after tonight, so don't stress out about taking notes or videos. If you can't read the screen, you'll have more opportunity to look at it closer. But the 3 categories that we were able to kind of filter these ideas into are future-ready learning, equity, and capacity. Future-ready learning is probably the most important of all these categories because it's about each and every student. It's about how they move forward with their future, how they learn, what opportunities do they have, and how do they plan for their learning experience. Capacity is another category that we were able to filter ideas into as well. We know that there's trailers at some of the schools we need to deal with. Some of the high schools are starting to if you look at the sheer numbers, question the capacity availability there. So capacity is not only about boundaries, but it's also about this notion of overlaying future-ready learning environments. And how does that influence capacity? So within each and every school, what capacity do they have to have flexible environments, to have collaborative spaces? It's no longer about four walls with a teacher standing up front. So hopefully we share some more information that kind of takes you deeper into that notion. The middle category is equity. A few people have spoken about equity already. Dr. Carpenter gave a great kind of idea of what equity can stand for and why it's important. Equity is really the bridge between the two. And when we talk about equity, we talk about equitable programs across each and every building for students. So as we dive deeper into this notion of equity, how do we have programs available in all buildings for everyone? So as we continue through our discussion this evening and move into future discussions, I really want you to keep those three categories as kind of a lens to view everything through. So if you get too deep on one detail, let's step back and look at it across the board and make sure we're touching all of these points. So I'm going to ask Dr. Katie Collier with the district to come up here. She's going to share a little bit about what the district has been working on from the structural implementation and why is this important to students?
Good evening. It's a pleasure to be here this evening. Again, this evening, I'm impressed by the turnout we have, that you are dedicating your time to come and begin to start this engagement series, start this conversation with us about the future of schools in Lee Summit. Because ultimately, that's what we're going to ask you to start to think about and dream about. Really, it's rather fitting that we begin this conversation with you in this space this evening, because certainly we are walking in this place, in a place of tradition. And what I know is that excellence permeates our school district. And we want to continue to ensure that our Lee Summit R7 public schools continue to remain that #1 choice, and that we continue to prepare our students for success in life, because we share together this collective dream and anticipation of watching our students through a pre-K-12 system walk across that stage at graduation. And then what does that mean for them, for their life? We want to ensure that they're college, career, and workforce ready. So this is a collective commitment we have together, and thank you. We want you to know, as we engage in this conversation, that every day, and in this conversation, we take great care with you to take care of and plan for your students. And so, as we know that on your mind, first and foremost this evening as you walk through the door, might be the two words of school boundaries, that we will be very thoughtful in any decisions relative to that, but want to also think big picture, long-term about the face of education in our school district. So as Dr. Carpenter referenced, the heart of our school district is our children. And the CFMP is going to help us, as Kyle Burrell also mentioned, do two things. Think about instruction, and also how the marriage of our philosophy about teaching and learning, how that marries with our physical spaces that our students are in every day, because our physical spaces should help complement and support and facilitate the learning and instruction in our schools. So tonight we're going to ask you to begin to imagine to reimagine. Certainly the picture on the right side of that screen is a remembrance of, stand and deliver instruction. But we're going to ask you to reimagine with us. Perhaps when you think about and you dig into your memory bank, you remember the sound of your feet hitting the tile as you walk down the halls. You might remember the head of the student sitting in front of you in 5th hour. You might remember the smell of textbooks as you open them for the first time at the beginning of the school year. You might remember homecoming and what that felt like for you. We want our students' memories to be just as rich, but different. Because the world that they're going to live in we can't quite imagine. Our physical spaces in our schools should support the intellectual, developmental growth and well-being of our students. This picture here certainly doesn't lend itself to collaboration, likely does not support the well-being and overall health development of a student. And what we know right now is that the physical face of the work environment in our schools across our country together are changing. So I want you to think about this when it comes to this phrase, future-ready learning. Public education has always worked to prepare students for their futures. The environments in which students live should also be preparing them for their future. The environments in which they learn. And we know that students have options. The technology and the resources that are available for our teachers and for our students are changing exponentially, and we want to ensure that those are available. And we know with future-ready learning, we want to be thinking about learning anywhere, anytime, allowing us to fulfill a mission of equity, giving each child what they need, when they need it, where they need it, and why they need it. So we want to begin to challenge what that daily school experience looks like for students when we think about future-ready learning. So if I'm a second grader and I'm learning about the water cycle, when I think about future-ready learning, I'm provided with authentic reasons to learn about that water cycle, and perhaps I'm being challenged to think about with my classmates solutions for providing clean water to students in another part of our globe. Whether students are 3 years old in our pre-K system, whether students are 10, 15, 17, we want to ensure and believe they all have the right to, irregardless of the level, the content, that they have the opportunity to continue to expand their curiosity and creativity, that they have the opportunity to experiment, interact, and have real-world experiences within the classroom. Some of our very traditional classroom settings don't allow for much real-world application. We have amazing teachers in our school district, and we have the best students. And we have teachers all across this district every day trying to provide students real-world opportunities and application of the content that they're learning. And they are seeking to change the furniture in their classrooms. What we know we want to do is, as a system, organizationally support those efforts, provide the professional development learning that our teachers deserve around this notion of future ready. And we want to multiply those opportunities and make sure that they're available across our district for students. So, business executives across the U.S. have told us this, as students have graduated high school across these United States. And they have said that in large numbers, we know this. Employees need to think critically, solve problems, innovate, collaborate, and communicate more effectively, and at every level within an organization. However, they report that employees lack those skills. So gone are the days of just teaching, reading, writing, and arithmetic, but instead we need to teach our students what we often refer to as the 4 C's: critical thinking, communication, collaboration, and creativity. You might refer to some of the skills that the business executives are referring to as those soft skills. So we asked our students, what is it that they believe, what conditions do they believe are important for ensuring long-lasting learning experiences? What do they think is important to them to help them in their learning at school? We have a student advisory group. Dr. Carpenter referenced it earlier, and last year that group had 7th through 12th graders. And when we asked them this question, they told us they want independence, They want to continue to have chances to create. They want opportunities to practice. They want continued choices. They want to continue positive communication and support with adults, teachers, and counselors in their schools. They want flexibility in their day. The physical spaces across our school district right now, it can arguably said, limit some of what our students are asking for. So we asked those questions of students last year. We asked those questions of our administrators. We have a team in the school district, the instructional operations team. We asked that team those questions, and at the end of the year surveyed our teachers. And that resulted in this visual image of what we refer to as the instructional compass. Essentially, what sits in this instructional compass are our beliefs about conditions that should exist in classrooms for students to foster learning. So you see the 4 C's that I referenced earlier there. Also, when we think about those 4 C's, what does that mean? What does that look like? Those 4 C's encourage students to take intellectual risks, foster students' ability to articulate and make arguments, claims, state their beliefs, to learn to consider multiple perspectives. We also talk about in this instructional compass this idea, again, of preparing for an authentic audience, making sure that learning is relevant, and that we also want to ensure transferability of skill. So if I'm learning a concept in chemistry, that I can apply what I learned there in a different context and for deeper meaning. So at the end of the day, our conversation tonight, and quite frankly, the purpose of our system in our school district, it's all about preparedness. The beginning of this conversation tonight is thinking about preparing our system to continue a tradition of excellence for the benefit of the students of this community. And it is also about preparedness to ensure, as we work through this process, that students leave ready for college, career, workforce, and ultimately success, and really what we all desire, their happiness in life. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Collier. So now we'll transition and go a little bit deeper into future-ready learning, and also talk a little bit about how this applies to environments. So I'm going to ask Kyle Burrell to come back up for a few minutes and share some deeper thoughts about future-ready learning.
All right, I appreciate everybody's time and allowing me to hopefully explain to you some of the why. This is the why. Why are we really looking at future-ready learning? What's it mean? Why is it important to kids? And so the presentation is really modeled around the instructional compass. And it does start with the board priority 2 about our facilities and providing equitable access to learning environments. And so we need to have a framework on how we approach that. And we'll be working with DLR and Gould Evans to establish some level of standard that will apply across the district to ensure that each student has the same opportunity for the equal learning environment. So to start off, we have to say, who are our students? We need to know who we're addressing. And we know in the district we have a diverse group of learners, and you can see the diversity level, and that has an impact on how they learn in space. We've got 341 English learners and 30 languages that are spoken in this district. It's always an amazing statistic. 19% free and reduced lunch, and that's a 6% increase in the last 10 years. So I know this isn't visible. What this chart shows is there's almost 2,500 kids in this district that have some diagnosed, just call it an issue, that they're being worked with in some way. And going back to Dr. Carpenter's introduction, What this really means, though, is that we have to prepare each student for success. And so it's not one or another, it's not top or bottom, it's each and every student. The ones in the middle, the ones all the way through the spectrum, that we need an environment that addresses all of their needs. So who are our kids in this district? We know the generations, we've seen charts on it, and the best way I can come up with to describe that is that they're connected multitaskers. We know our kids, they're always connected to their surroundings and to the world through their devices, and it seems like they're always multitasking. So the issue we've come up with is that our classrooms were designed 100 years ago. And many times it's called the forward education model because it was really initiated in the Industrial Revolution. We had these great collaborative spaces called one-room schoolhouses where all ages and subjects were taught together. But the country needed workers. We need people to get into industry. And so we set up assembly lines for schools. And the classrooms largely modeled that. We put kids by ages and classrooms and subjects, and we just marched them through education. And this method largely is based on the fact that all kids should be able to learn the same thing at the same time by the same person, and it's just a process. And so our education system that we still currently have was really designed to educate the masses. And unfortunately, our classrooms, they're still modeled after that same environment. So what we know is learning, it's a complex interplay. It's not just about buildings, it's not just about teachers, it's an interplay between so many factors in a kid's life, their social, emotional well-being, an interplay between all of the stuff that they carry into school with them every day. So what this slide says is that really our job is to come up with a thoughtful connection between our facilities and the learning environment that these kids are in. And so that thoughtful connection is what we're really going after. So we're going to talk a little bit through what are the students' basic needs, and that's really where it starts. And so we know in Maslow's hierarchy that until we take care of kids' basic needs for physiological and safety and security needs, that they cannot move on to advanced thinking. And so then that level of thinking goes through the different methods of learning in Bloom's taxonomy. So what we're really trying to do is get our kids to a point where they can be creative thinkers. We want to promote creativity in the thinking of our kids. So a lot of these physiological needs, they'll be discussed, and we'll evaluate daylight, acoustics, indoor air quality, lighting, proper scale. Those things need to be factored in for the varying groups. And then, of course, the culture that has to be continually reinforced that we already have in so many buildings based on diversity, respect, love, security, caring. You can really put all kinds of words in there that create the culture we want our kids to be in. So, moving on, we're going to talk a little bit about students' minds and their bodies. So, the creative minds that we want kids to have is a part of our vision. The school district encourages innovation and creativity. So what is creativity? Well, it's something kids are born with. All kids are born creative. And what the common thought is that we're educating people out of creativity through the overstructured environments. It's absolutely true. If you survey preschoolers, what do they tell you? They just love school. They're excited, they're engaged, they're ready and willing to dive into their education every single day. So what we have to answer for ourselves is why, over time, does creativity decline for kids? The older we get, the less creative we become. And in addition to that, what this chart shows is the less engaged we become in our environment. So engagement declines, creativity declines, and we need to open up our educational environments to compensate for that. So I love this quote by Picasso: "Every child is an artist. The problem is how to remain an artist once we grow up." So one of the ways we do this in our facilities is we promote right brain, left brain type thinking. We have multisensory environments. So of course, right brain, more creative, more thought-provoking, challenging spaces. But then we also have to give kids structured environments, the left brain side. And through these multisensory environments, we're promoting kids' use of both sides of the brain. And that's where creative thinking comes. So that's why you see a lot of the types of designs you do today. So what it comes down to in the senses is the fact that the senses are the gateway of the mind. And so as Dr. Collier mentioned, we retain and we retrieve memories through our senses. And so having a multisensory environment is critical. So real quick, just some ways this gets influence in buildings and some standards we need to have are using color, painting with a purpose, using subtle chromatic changes that can have an influence on kids and their lives, using materials and textures for different purposes in buildings can have a big impact. Lighting, whether it's diffuse and direct, we all know that lighting can dramatically change space, and color temperature in itself has a big impact on visual acuity for students. And lighting can also be fun and engaging. It could be just an exciting part of a space in itself. So how does a student's body weigh into this? Well, we know that physical and emotional fitness is important because students learn when they're healthy and they feel good. We need to promote student wellness because that's how kids are going to learn most effectively. So as Dr. Collier mentioned, the student wellness program, it's going to be and is a really important part of this learning environment. So what we know is there's a really important connection between the body and the brain. Fine motor skills, we need to embrace fidgeting. We need to allow kids to exercise that fine motor part of their day. Because the concentration levels that we know people have, it doesn't match the time that we're asking kids to sit in classrooms. It doesn't really even match the time we're asking you to sit here tonight, and so we appreciate that. But I'm glad you're in comfortable chairs, so you guys, hopefully I'm not losing you. So there's also the gross motor side of movement. Movement stimulates the vestibular system. So what you see here on the left side is a brain that's been sitting. That's what your guys' brains look like. On the right side, we get you up and move you around for about 20 minutes, and your brain's going to look like it does on the right side. So lights up your brain, movement opens up pathways, it helps you be a better creative thinker. Activates hormones that increases brain activity. So a lot of this is accomplished through furniture. And so we know that comfortable kids learn. So we can't expect kids to sit in the same plastic bucket seat for 7 50-minute periods a day and expect them to be comfortable and learn at their best. So a lot of the ways furniture helps is through motion. You guys have seen a lot of these types of pieces of furniture, and we'll work on furniture standards that are good for kids and promote motion. The other side is furniture that's comfortable. Kids don't have to be uncomfortable in school. We can have a furniture standard that is maintained that allows kids to collaborate, to be comfortable, and to really enjoy their connection with their furniture. The furniture needs to be flexible. Collaboration is such an important part of how kids need to learn that we need to give them options for flexibility so they can have some control over their environment. And it needs to be ergonomic. We need to fit varying students' body types. It really is kind of ridiculous to even think that, we buy every high school kid the same chair, and they're all 5'6" and 120 pounds, right? So, we need to be able to, not that we can give everybody a new chair, but we need to meet kids' needs and make sure they're comfortable and they have furniture that fits their body types. So moving on, student choice is something that's an important part of this compass because we know that engages kids in their learning. Engaged learners are going to be a part of their learning, they're going to be a part of their education. And so kids, when they're engaged, it illuminates their individual strengths. So kids are going to find their passion, and that's going to lead them into their careers, into their future. So we facilitate this through a variety of different types of learning spaces, and that's what gives them some choice, and it activates both sides of their brain. So ownership is an important part of future-ready learning. These kids need to know that the buildings are theirs, and what that does is it fosters a sense of belonging. These kids need to know that they belong there, that it's their building, that the culture is about them being a part of the building. So home bases need to be discussed. You know, these are some of the elements we've used in the past. We give kids lockers, cubbies, totes, all kinds of things to create their home school and to be able to be organized. But is that something that we're going to need 5, 10, 15 years in the future? That needs to be evaluated. And also display. Display fosters a sense of pride and belonging. We want our kids to feel proud. We know you walk into the building, they see their workout. That is an important part, and it needs to be a standard in all of our buildings where kids can see their work displayed. And we need to allow them to create space. Again, we keep reinforcing collaboration, but it's really about choice. It's about giving kids choice about how they learn. They learn from each other. They learn in small groups. They learn in so many different ways that the furniture needs to accommodate that. So the final piece of this puzzle is the cultural connection. And it's really embodied, starts with these meetings that we're having, and it's just amazing how people turn out. You guys take your time to come and learn about what we're doing and learning how much we care about working with you to create space for kids. And so it's a part of our vision. We have we reflect a culture of respect and acceptance. So this culture, it provides an inclusive environment. Kids who feel culturally connected to their buildings, they feel included and they want to be at school and learn. So the connections that are there can be done through having some signature elements in schools, and most of our schools do a great job with this. They provide something for kids to rally around and be a part of. We also do a great job with our Partners in Education program. And it's a great way that we can have mentorship that connects kids, not only with each other, but with different people in the community and backgrounds. And again, just reinforcing their engagement in school. So really at the end of the day, what it comes down to is the fact that we need to do something about this creativity gap, socioeconomic gaps, engagement gaps, the way that kids are not getting the choice in their educational environments. And so the important part of this is that I really want to reinforce. People they remember sometimes the first thing you say, not the last thing you say, but the last thing about this is that none of this is going to happen in a vacuum. It's not about facilities, it's about culture. Our teachers, our administration, our community, the kids, everybody's going to be a part of this. We're not going to get ahead of instruction and do a bunch of improvements to buildings that aren't truly functional and serving a purpose for kids. And so I've given you a quick explanation of some concepts and a lot of the background on why future-ready learning is important. And so now what I'd like to do is turn the mic over to David Reed. He's with Gould Evans, and we're going to kind of just give you some image and some explanation of how the future-related learning concepts can be seen more in the physical environments and space that kids use.
Good evening. We're kind of in the home stretch here. So what we wanted to do is just share some examples of what some of these kind of design strategies might look like as partners. The school is really a tool for the educators to have more options with which to deliver learning that best fits the variability across all programs. So it's not designing schools to be trendy and be innovative, but it's to design schools to give educators flexibility in the way they deliver instruction. So, we don't have any solutions yet. It goes back to Dr. Carpenter's blank slate. But, if you're looking for kind of a mental picture of what it could look like, think about school settings that may have still some classroom spaces that may look traditional. closer to, there we go, okay. If you've got kids like I do that are great in a traditional classroom, you don't want to see that go away. We're not proposing that at least some of it be big with entirely new schools, but there are additional types of spaces. So here you see traditional classrooms and some shared collaborative spaces. Educators want to begin to collaborate with other teachers to deliver more multidisciplinary content. The space can adapt to that, give them that option. It's really more like taking a series of singular classrooms and have a singular function and creating a school that's more like a Swiss Army knife that allows teachers to do a lot more things. And it even kind of begins to allow them to set up instructional spaces that might provide more career readiness skills, more workplace-based learning styles, if you will. But you might be thinking, well, we've got a whole district full of existing schools that don't look like that. They don't have floor plans that look like that. But there's a lot of ways to take those ideas and take the notion of a double-loaded corridor that you see at the top image, and begin to kind of break those walls down and create those shared spaces that teachers can move in and out of. So it's also a notion of not having kids in the same classroom all day. Because we all know that when we get up and move around, change environment, get our bodies moving, we're going to have better attention restoration properties. We're going to be able to actually learn more effectively throughout the course of the day.
Sir, if you rotate the mic this way.
This way?
There you go.
Thank you. So just some examples of what that looks like. You see here, classroom breaking into shared common space, movable walls, may not be a necessary part of the solution. Spaces here that have traditional classroom space, opening into open learning space, taking advantage of those public circulation spaces. So looking at multi-function opportunities where corridors are not just corridors, but also opportunities where there's more enclosed private team space, all within the proximity of one or two instructors. So it's easy to kind of shift learning modes from one space to another. Thinking about specialty resource spaces, we're finding that the art of the pitch or the presentation skill sets of students is really critical, and what's becoming known as the gig economy, where it's very much about developing entrepreneurial skill sets and selling their ideas. So creating spaces that support student development in those areas. Spaces like the one on the right that support different types of creativity, different types of learning, like project-based learning, really engaging with more systems and tools and that sort of thing. Taking every space, like the top image, dining commons, and considering how it can serve as a more effective learning space throughout the day, not just supporting dining during lunch and before school meals. Classrooms that open onto each other so instructors can kind of move back and forth and collaborate with one another. Just thinking about spaces that can be more than just one space. And we don't want you to come away from this presentation thinking, oh my gosh, our schools are all going to look entirely different from what they look like today. These are intended as spaces that complement a lot of what's already there. So, these are wonderful examples of learning centers that serve as a resource for a school where multiple teachers can have access to them and either use them just for their class or for multiple classes. So think about these as ways to augment a lot of what center schools can complement what teachers might be doing in their classrooms. And just some other examples. This is actually a kindergarten center. One district chose to build a specialty center just for their kindergarten students, so there's really a lot better community practice developed among those kindergarten teachers, an environment especially tailored toward those really small learners. And it became an alternative strategy for that particular district's urgencies related to capacity in their elementary schools. So, wrapping up, this is the Missouri Innovation Campus, which a lot of you may be familiar with. We think it's a nice example of different ways to think about how school facilities can be thought about, how school facilities can really begin to replicate the behaviors and skill sets needed in the work environment, because our learning environments become role models for our behavior. Our environments strongly influence the way we engage in them. So with that,
What's happened at UCM is you've partnered with Lee's Summit School District, with local healthcare, engineering, energy, and infrastructure firms, and everybody's now working together to equip students with better skills, allow them to graduate faster, with less debt, and with the certainty of being able to get a job at the other end. That is exactly the kind of innovation we need when it comes to college costs. And I want the entire country to notice it.
Our mission at Summit Technology Academy is to be known as the premier place to go if you want to launch into anything in the STEM career field areas.
This facility was meant to put you in a fire truck, and it's meant to be driven differently.
working with Dr. Ambrose was great. He really challenged us to rethink the way education is being delivered, and he's a visionary in that regard. And so this building really begins to help us demonstrate that. We blew out walls from classrooms, we created open labs, we recreated the workplace environment.
But I just enjoy the fact that I can come to a place where I feel like I'm not just going to school, I'm actually going to a workplace.
So we began to really challenge ourselves to rethink how we're going to approach the design. We didn't want to look like a classroom, and so we began to look at corporate precedents in terms of how to organize space.
I chose to come here because it seemed like it was much more hands-on than regular schooling. It seemed like you actually got to experience it more firsthand, and it was more work-related.
So this space that we're looking at now had been programmed as 3 individual classrooms, and we blew out the walls and created an open learning environment that's also open to the public areas, where you can't lecture in a typical manner. It really requires a flipped learning model where students need to come in and be prepared to work, much like they would be in a professional office.
I love all the glass windows and being able to look in and seeing all the cool things that people are doing. That's amazing, just walking by and seeing people work on biomedical things or building whatever they're building in engineering. That's pretty cool.
So if you're not feeling one room that day, you go to a different one, get a different view of scenery. And sometimes it just kind of helps open up the ideas, makes it easier to collaborate.
As a result, was to design the building to completely open it up so that a student could actually be in class even though his class wasn't actually in session. And it really expanded his ability or her ability to actually work on a project outside of the traditional class schedule.
We stay after school sometimes and work on a project as well as work on whatever we want.
That's kind of the nice thing is it doesn't feel like you're at school anymore. It feels like you're working with your friends on some cool project. And so it's not like you're sitting down in a lecture. It's you're out here in the shop making stuff.
And I've always conducted myself like their boss, like the department head. I walk around, check on the progress, see if any questions. Then I'll come back to my office and do some of my own work too. So it's really like a workplace environment for them and for the instructors here at Summit Technology. And I mean, it's just incredible.
So a great example of innovation within your current community. We've been talking about a lot of high-level things, so we're going to dive down now and talk a little bit more about some of the data that Applied Economics has been working on. So Rick Bramer, I'm going to ask him to come up and share some information. Rick's been working with the district for many years and has really got a gauge on trends and the demographics within the district. So I'm going to let him jump into that a little bit deeper.
Good evening, everyone. Talk a little bit about demographics in the district and kind of give you the lay of the land so you understand what some of the challenges are that we're facing and some of the opportunities that we have. Applied Economics, I've been doing this kind of work for state and local governments and school districts for about 30 years. Over the last 23 years, as with my own firm called Applied Economics, I've worked for about 50 different school districts or different places around the country and have had the privilege serving your community for the last 16 years. This is my 16th fall of being here to put together the demographic program update. And that program scope really has been very consistent and it's robust. And it's kept us from building buildings when we didn't need them and vice versa. We've had most of the buildings we need when we need them, and that's important. It's broken down into these components.
We definitely look at enrollment trends, you know, total enrollment's important. Distribution of enrollment by grade is very important. And then there's a component now that we're really having to look more at, which is special needs, especially in the pre-kindergarten group, where even though kindergarten enrollment hasn't been growing that fast in the district, the number of kids who need pre-K services has been growing rather rapidly at the same time. Look at the population characteristics of the district. We're talking about, mainly about age, but also the age and type of the householder, how long they've lived in their house, what kind of family structure they have, how long they're likely to live there into the future. Obviously, we have real estate development impacts. There is construction occurring in the district, and there certainly has been over the years. We're going to take a look at that and what kind of impact that has. And then for the district, we've developed and maintained two models. One is a district level macroeconomic. How does Lee Summit School District fit into Jackson County and Missouri? And how are those greater regional trends going to impact us? And then we do I call it a neighborhood level or bottom-up kind of model, where we're looking at not just total in the district, but where kids are really in the district and where neighborhoods are. Because some neighborhoods were built a lot sooner or later than others, and they're really they're in different places in their own evolution. We typically have the most kids you're ever going to have when a neighborhood is new, and then people age, and eventually you move out. Everybody does move out of their house one way or another someday. It really does happen. But we have to know when and what's going to happen after that. And then we use all this information to help support programs like this, and staffing and facility planning and so on and so forth. And when I talk about that neighborhood level or that bottom-up thing, what I'm really talking about is this geography that we established 16 years ago. We call them planning grids. But these red cells that the district is divided up into, there's about 170 of them, they don't change over time like when the attendance boundaries do change over time, so that we can go back and I can tell you how many students by grade lived in each one of these red boxes over the last 16 years. So we can correlate the age of the housing, the age of the householders, with how many students we're actually getting, not just in the whole district, but sort of on a neighborhood by neighborhood basis. And like I said before, everybody's in sort of a different point in their evolution along in that, and we'll see some evidence of it. So some of the contents of the report, I know there's a lot of stuff up here you're not going to be able to read well tonight, so I'm going to more focus on what the takeaways are and tell you how to read the stuff so that when you see it online and you can look at it, you know, in more detail, you'll be able to understand what you're looking at. This one is just basically annual enrollment. It says 40th day, it's really the last Wednesday of September is how the state of Missouri does it. So the blue bars is the number of K-12 students enrolled in the district the last 28 years. And the green line on the top is the annual year-over-year change. And that green line is keyed to that right-hand axis, which is in percentages. And so you can see that during the 1990s and most of the 2000s, we had some really substantial growth in the district. The district about doubled in population during that period of time. Enrollment just about doubled during that period of time. And it started to slow down even at the end of that period of time before the recession. And then, of course, during the recession, it went rather flat like everyone else did. But even since then, even since 2010, we've only gained about 550 students, which comes out to about an annual growth rate of about 0.5%. So we're growing at less than 1% per year now, which is a departure, definitely, from, I think, what the community had been used to in the past. And part of that reason why we're not seeing that same kind of growth, even though we're still having construction going on, is this aging of the population that I was talking about before. And you see that reflected in the breakdown of students by grade. So these four lines break down the enrollment in the district into four groups, K2, 3, 5, 6, 8, 9, 12. And this chart shows you the average number of students that's in each one of those groups, the average number by grade. And you start off at the end, in the beginning, back in the 90s, where the biggest group was the K2 group. Grade by grade, that was the largest group in the district. And as the district has aged, development has slowed down, you see that that now has become the smallest group. And in fact, the number of K2 students hasn't changed appreciably in the district since about 2005 or 2006, while the other grades have accelerated, and particularly at the high school level, and we'll see that in some of the numbers later. But it's a different structure. It's a different district than you thought of 15 years ago, for sure. We talked about this neighborhood. What supports that is we look at students where they actually live. So this dot, man, every little purple circle on there is a student that lives in the district. So we just look at addresses and what schools they attend and so forth. But we do that every year, and we can aggregate that up into the red boxes. And it's also, again, how I can look at where students are coming from relative to housing characteristics. The other thing I'm going to take the opportunity to do while this is up here is to talk about the distribution itself, in that, you have the traditional sort of center of the district and the expansions that have turned out, to the west, which, started some, probably 25, 30 years ago as well. But what's happened is that there's this big area of land in the district. It's owned by Property Reserve Incorporated, which is basically a company of the Mormon Church. And they own the better part of 3,000 acres in the district, which they have no intention, as I've been told, to develop anytime soon. And so what has happened is that as the growth has continued, it's had to jump over that area. And so when you start thinking about drawing lines and doing attendance areas and those kinds of things, it's just important to understand that we have a rather unique distribution. And so you can't just draw a line anywhere and expect to get an equal number of students. Some areas that don't have many students, and then there's these gaps that we're going to have to deal with. So it's just something I want you to file away. You can use that same data to look at the change in enrollment within the district. So this is the last 5 years. We don't have 18-19 data up yet, but from 2012-13 through 17-18 last year, this is the change in enrollment in each one of those 170 squares. Everywhere where you see blue on this map means enrollment has declined during that period of time. And basically that includes the vast majority of the center part of the district. The only places that you see pinks and reds, which are increases, are generally places where we're still building houses. And then we're talking about Chapman Farms and Foxbury and Woodland Trails and Eagle Creek and Dulong View and Winterset Valley. Those kind of areas that have been continuing to add students. So what this does for us is it creates a challenge, because total enrollment hasn't been increasing very much, but the distribution of the students is changing. So you can have enough seats, they're just not all in the right places. And that's part of, what ends up in every district I work for, driving something like this process. Every 10 or 15 years, you're going to have to come back and say, does it fit where we are and who we are? And it's just a natural part. Every district experiences that. We talked about residential development being a factor. This shows the number of units permitted by year over the last several years. The blue bars being the number of single-family units, and the green bars being multifamily units. And when I say multifamily, I'm including townhouses, duplexes, and apartments all into that category. And one of the things that's changing in the district right now is, while we've always had a fair number of townhouse units and duplex units, what we're seeing now is more multifamily in terms of apartments coming into the district. And apartments are actually harder for me to predict than single-family houses, because some apartment units generate a lot of kids and some generate almost none. And the type of, for the most part, type of apartments that we see being built in the district right now are not targeted really to people with kids. Like the new one that just opened over off of Chipman Road. It's obviously aimed at people who are working, at the campus there and in that area, and in high-tech jobs all over the valley. You can see we've had a recovery to some extent. The number of single-family units being built has been increasing, but very slowly, really, compared to where we used to be. And one of the things that's causing that is that your housing supply, what people can go out and buy, and particularly with new housing, there's no entry-level product. So it's all move up and upper end, which is also fueling the demand for those multifamily units, because with all the economic development success that you've had, the jobs that are being created, people do want to come and live here. And the solution to finding affordable housing is, at least in the beginning, to rent an apartment. Development potential, so what's coming in the future in terms of development. And we have a very comprehensive inventory of basically every piece of land that's not already developed in the district and what we think it might be when it grows up. And yellow colors on here indicate residential development, and red indicates commercial development. But we keep a very careful inventory of what we think is coming. And just what we've identified now, which does not include some of the extreme corners of the district where there could be additional potential, way down the road. But even just what we've identified has the potential for about 25,000 additional housing units, which is the equivalent of about 60% of the current inventory. So a big chunk. I mean, we still have a lot more growth coming. It's just not coming very fast, but it's going to last. We're going to be a continually growing district for decades and decades to come. Most of that, where you see that impact then isn't, across that broad canvas, it's in these purple areas, which are the projects. So because of infrastructure needs and so on, when you see housing occurring, it's usually in one of these major projects. But if you look at where those are and how they ring the community, you can see that we're pushing, naturally all the growth to the outside. We have all these declines on the inside, and that's what gives us that challenge in the distribution of students relative to the distribution of seats. In terms of the actual projections, we're looking at about 7,700 housing units or so, according to the current micro projections, being built over the next 10 years, so about 700 a year. That's a little more than we're currently doing on average, but well less than we did during the boom years. Some of which is fueling that is the fact that, unlike in the past, we're saying about 35% of the new housing units will come from this multifamily source. So a lot of those, that increased activity will be multifamily and not in single family. What we do is we look at what kind of population that indicates. Last year we were just under 100,000. I believe this is the year that the district actually crosses the threshold. And it will be over 100,000 people actually living in the district in about 40,000 housing units. We translate We translate those housing units into households, which is simply an occupied housing unit. Somebody actually lives there. And then we look at not only the district level, but at the sub-district level. I'm just showing you the district. How many students that has generated. We measure that in two ways. The school-aged population, the student generation number, is the total number of kids aged 5 to 17 who live in the district, whether they go to a district school or they go to any school. That's all the kids. Whereas the second set of columns looks at the actual K-12 enrollment, how many kids have been in the school. The service rate is just the ratio of those two. So what share of the kids in the community does the Lee Summit School District actually serve? And like most districts in the country, that number has fallen in recent years because of online opportunities, homeschooling opportunities, parochial schools. New one moved into the district here not too long ago. And so that number is sliding. And some of the technology that's being added into education is going to continue to bring that number down. So we've got that built into our projections that we're going to fall from about an 89% service rate to about an 86% service rate over the next 10 years. So we don't have to build space for all of the kids, because some of them are going to be choosing those alternative methods. It does result, though, in about an 1,800 student increase, we believe, over the next 10 years. Now, if you kind of do the simple math, you're only getting 1,800 students out of 7,700 housing units, which is far below the average what we used to have of about almost a half a kid per unit. But it's because of that aging. The population is aging out while the new ones are in. So you're just not getting the same bang out of construction that you were in the past. Like I said, this happens at the district level, but in our projections, when we also do those by the 171 areas. And so nothing to look at in too great a detail here, but just again how to read it, where everywhere on the red, it's red on this map, we expect to have enrollment increases over the next 5 years, and whereas blue will have decreases. We expect to have continued decreases in much of the heart of the district, although the rate of the decrease will actually begin to taper off, and until, I think in the second 5-year period, we're going to actually get to what we call neighborhood regeneration. So we're going to get to the point where that, what I call the heart of the district, ages out. People will move out and new families will move in. Will they be as young or as structured as they were at the beginning? Probably not. Will they have more kids than they do right now? Probably. Neighborhoods typically go through some sort of a cycle. It's usually 30 to 35 year cycle, even though the average householder moves about every 12 years. It just takes that long for everything to line up and to go through a cycle to actually turn around, but we're going to be there now. You know, 10 years from now, these areas are going to be 35, 40 years old. Then, I know you didn't read any of this, but this is what I end up giving to the district, is projected enrollment by school. I just want to tell you how to read it so you can look at it later, but as you go across here, if you're seeing red, it's a big school, heart of the chart. If it's blue, it's a little school. If it's getting redder, it's getting bigger. It's getting bluer, it's getting smaller. So you can look at all of those. We don't need to rattle through all those numbers. I would point out real quickly that there's a difference between the number of students who live in an area, which is the attendance area number you see, and the number that go to a school. We have special needs programs and other programs, and parents who choose and apply to take their kid, to a different school other than the one that they would be boundaried into. So there are some differences there that we have to account for. But the most interesting thing about this chart right now for me is that if you look down what the change for the last 5 years is that we've got 3 elementary schools that had growth of nearly 100 students during that period of time. We've got a couple that have had, including Prairie View, that had some significant losses. But when you add all of them together, the total enrollment in the elementary schools in the district has only changed by 25 students in the last 5 years. So all of that increase that we've been having, what we've had, has been at the middle school and the high school level, with almost 100 new students at the middle school level and almost 300 new students at the high school level. So the takeaway basically is right now 3/4 of all of the increase that we're seeing is coming at the high school level, which is what's driving those space needs for that group. So the conclusions are that I do believe you're going to continue to grow. I do believe you're going to continue to change. But I'm very optimistic about the future of the district with the amount of economic development that's coming and so on and so forth. I'm real bullish. I'm real positive about your community, and I think you should be too. Growth can create pains, but it's a lot better than decline, because I've been in the communities that are doing that too. So you have to take it for what it is, and I wish you all the best with it.
Thank you, Rick. So a lot of great data there. Hopefully you'll be able to dig into it a little bit more later. We're very close to the community conversation piece, so bear with me for a few more seconds. I wanted to bring this up on the screen. This is a tool that the design team in the district is using, our capacity map. So this is going to be a tool we use that we layer a bunch of information over the top of. This is really just the start, and as Rick mentioned, we're still getting more data for the current school year. So as we get this live data, some of the numbers will be adjusted to reflect that. We'll also start to lay over flexible learning environment information on top of this, and programming across the district. So this map will evolve as we grow further in the process. So with that, we're going to transition now to the community conversation piece. And I'd like to bring up Josh with our partner firm, Link Strategic Partners, to help us move through this process and explain a little bit more about the feedback loop and what the engagement series looks like moving forward.
Good evening, everyone. I'm going to be very quick. I'm going to give you an overview of sort of where we are and where we're headed in the process, and I'm happy to answer any questions later on when we are out and about in the engagement station in the gallery walk. So, judging on the questions which I've reviewed, all of you have already done your homework, you've dived in, you're well aware of lots of information we've put out. There were some information sheets that were distributed during back to school. It sounds like a lot of you have reviewed that. You've also had a chance to take the online survey, which is great. We appreciate you taking the time to do that. So everything kind of got started right around that back to school period. And as you see, we're in this engagement series 1, kind of hard to read, but September 10th to 13th. We've had some great community meetings this week. We appreciate all of you coming out tonight, and a lot of people have come out the other nights as well. It's been a great start to this process. I will mention that it's a long process. It's a many months long process, and we appreciate you bearing with us as we sort of get all this information out. There's a lot of learning for us and for the community to do, so we appreciate you and your patience on that. As we move forward, we're going to move into Engagement Series 2. That's when we use all this feedback we've gotten, all the questions, all the opinions and perspectives, and begin to sort of consolidate some concepts that'll be featuring in the Facilities Master Plan, which will allow all of you to react to. And then eventually we sort of begin to funnel a little bit further, and toward November, during that 3rd engagement series, we'll have some recommendations we'll be able to discuss collaboratively. So you'll see the format tonight. We've put the comment cards out. There are a lot of questions. They're really good questions. We appreciate the thought and the time you've put into them. That's one way to engage tonight. Another way is through the gallery walk. So you saw those sets of posters as you walked in. Thanks for taking a look at those. After we're done with the presentation, as you walk out, you'll have another chance to take a look at all the information. Please, if when you walk out there, you'll see those post-it notes. Those are for you. Grab a marker. If you have opinions, if you have thoughts, if there's a vision of the future that you want to make sure that we know about, let us know. My advice to you is if you want to make sure it gets reviewed and considered as part of this process, write it down. Get us a question, get us an opinion, get on a post-it note, and that'll really help. Also, we've got some exit surveys for you to take. There's Chromebooks that are lining the hall as you exit to the right. If you take a few minutes, really short survey, we want to hear from you how tonight went, how we can improve. We also have a paper version if you prefer that. Our job as the engagement facilitators here is to make sure that your voice features as prominently in this process as possible. So we're giving you as many formats to share your opinion and share your thoughts as possible. So we've got the online survey, which I know many of you have taken. Again, thank you. We're doing these regular community meetings to make sure that there's an open dialogue in real time for those that can attend. We appreciate it. We've got the exit surveys to give us feedback as you leave these meetings and the gallery walk. And there's always an opportunity to send us an email if you have thoughts and you want that open-ended format to share your ideas. Regularly, you're going to see on the website that we're posting updates, we're posting reports on the feedback. And just so you know, if we don't get to the question that you wrote down on the card today, those questions are going to be posted online. There's a really solid commitment by the district to be as transparent and open as possible, which is not something that I see in all districts, but I want to commend them on that. All right, without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to Kelly Wachel, Head of PR for the district.
Thank you, sir. Have you click form cards in my hand. Good evening again, I'm Kelly Wachel, and this slide references our CFMP website. And I hope you've had a chance to visit this website, check it out. What you'll see logged here are FAQs, backgrounders, the capacity map. This is where we will log the presentation from this week, all of our online surveys. Hope, raise your hand. Hope's videotaping us tonight. So the video from each of the series will also be posted next week, and you can watch those if you haven't been able to visit. Tell your friends and family and your neighbors if they haven't been able to come to these series. They can watch the full thing at their leisure online. We do want to report that our online survey that's been released, it closes on Monday about 5 o'clock. We've had almost 3,800 respondents. The majority of those respondents are parents of current students in the district, and then the next highest respondents are staff members. So we're really encouraged by the internal and the external thought and comments that are going into that survey. So again, thank you for that. This slide talks about stakeholders. We find it very important to ensure all of our stakeholders have a voice in this process, like Josh was speaking to. So you'll see up here a number of groups represented throughout the process, with the community at the top, meaning this is a community process. It is a community experience that we want to walk through with you. It mentions students. We have students and their input being provided as well. We talk about the Board of Education. Board of Education, raise your hand over there. I saw 3 of you. Welcome, thanks for being here. We talked about superintendent's leadership team. We mentioned instructional operations team, how we deliver instruction for our kids in our schools. CFMP team. We have a core team of members, including parents, business community members, retired citizens, alumni, teachers, principals, kids. We have a lot of people on this committee dedicated to representing a large portion of our community and walking through the process and threading their thoughts and their recommendations and their suggestions with us through the process. We also are talking about DLR Group, Gould Evans, Link, and Applied Economics. You've heard from most of those folks tonight. They are our partners in this process. They are professional services to make sure that we offer you a professional process in conjunction and collaboration with the school district. All right. The next thing we're going to do, we're going to transition pretty quickly to the panel here. But before we do that, we wanted you to have a chance to hear some student voice as we have asked kids what their thoughts were around the process that we're embarking upon this fall. So without further ado, let's hear some student voice.
we all have the opportunities to succeed and make to the next level. I think it's just a matter of realizing those opportunities and taking advantage of them.
This is here for you, and people are not don't have these opportunities, and you get them.
The school district offers so many other things. Like you can go to Herman, you can go to Summit Tech, you can go to MIC.
I like how a lot of responsibility has been given to kids, because there's clubs and things that are run by students, and it really sets them up with those leadership skills, which they're going to need later in life.
To really learn, you have to have a certain level of vulnerability and a willingness to make a mistake in front of others.
I think to learn and to really strive to be the greatest, you have to put yourself out there, and you have to be willing to try and fail.
Making mistakes as yourself has to start with accepting others' mistakes. It all begins with you.
Yeah.
I think I know what you're about to say.
Yeah, are you about to say it? Because I'm sorry, you go. You say it.
Because I think that we shouldn't really worry so much about grades like we do, because if we're really learning something, the grades are going to reflect that. So I think we should focus on the learning portion rather than saying busy work and stuff just to fill the grade books. Not do anymore. Yeah.
We're all part of Lee Summit, so we're all in a similar type of position.
There are rivalries on and off the field or on and off the court, or in debate or in tennis. It doesn't matter what you play or what you do. There are going to be those rivalries. I mean, as for me, I don't hate Wes off the court. They live in the same town as me. I like them. They're my fellow members of Lee Summit.
I think it'd be awesome, like you said, to collaborate with all the other schools.
Yeah. We and I have got together in functions like district choir or I'll say choir and stuff like that. It's just another pocket of people to hang out with, and there's so much in common. While there are those divisions, I just feel like the things that tie us together at our own schools can just as easily tie us together at our own schools. Yeah.
I want students to be able to express themselves for who they want to be, not who they should be. I feel that once you express yourself without people judging you, and you go with the fact that everyone's different, I think that's going to go great for everyone.
I just want future kids of Lee Summit to know that it's alright to fail. mistakes, and that's how you get better. And to me, I feel like that's really a major part of like the only way to get better is to fail and get back up and realize that it's okay to be wrong.
I want kids to learn while having fun and making relationships with their teachers and like having their teachers as like their best friends.
I think something that'd be cool to see, like we talked about it the whole time, is the interconnectedness in between the three schools or three areas. I guess.
Making new friends, like
What's this, like 10 minutes?
Yeah.
Like that, it seems like it's a cause.
All the way. All right, hashtag #7FutureReady. We invite you to engage with us on social media and take a look at that thread to provide any extra comments or see what other people are saying about the process and about their thoughts around Future Ready. So at this time, we're going to transition to the panel portion where we're going to answer some of the questions that you all asked of us. And as they make their way up here, we're going to stand and be a little bit more informal tonight so that we can have more of a conversation with you. We're going to turn the microphones on, get those situated, and then we're going to have each of them self-introduce to you and tell you who they are.
I guess I'll start. I'm David Sharp, Assistant Superintendent for Secondary Education.
Good evening, Don Smith, Assistant Superintendent for Equity and Student Services.
Thanks for being here tonight. Jennifer Kephart, Assistant Superintendent for Elementary Education.
I'm David Reed with Gould Evans Architects.
Rick Brammer with Applied Economics. Kyle Gorell, Director of Facilities.
Emily Miller, Assistant Superintendent for Operational Services.
All right, so we're going to volley some questions to the panel and direct them to the folks here, and then they'll answer those, and we'll have a conversation on some of those questions. Just to reiterate again, the questions that we do not get tonight, we have about 40 to 50 questions that we received from you. We will make sure that we log those and track each of those with answers on the CFMP website so you can see the spectrum of answers and the spectrum of questions. So we're going to start with this question about programming this evening, and Dr. Sharp and Dr. Miller, Dr. Kephart, these might be appropriate questions for you. So the question is any consideration being given to specialize in each of the three high schools, example in STEM, liberal arts, athletics, so that students could prioritize their learning? More resources would be provided for the focus area for that high school, thereby saving the district funds and giving our kids the best resources. So again, is any consideration being given to specializing in each of the three high schools, either in STEM, liberal arts, athletics, examples, so that students could prioritize their learning?
Well, I would say as a part of the CMFP process, that the vision that we have, as the canvas for that is pretty blank right now. To be able to take a look at that and evaluate that going through. That being said, I think a strength of our school district is our program. And we offer roughly over 300 courses for each of our students to get involved in. And when you look at that and prioritize and specialize in that, to look at the multiple on-ramps that we have for students that exist in each of our schools. So we're very resource-rich when it comes to that. When I talk about STEM, we have all the programs through Project Lead the Way, up through MIC, through STA. Those are available all the way through that. With the courses, we have IB, Advanced Studies, dual college credit, dual enrollment, innovation track courses. There's all kinds of other things that we offer to do that. I think through the process that we have, with the vision that we have with that, talking about the resources, yes, there's probably a way to really look at that to make sure that we're maximizing those resources in each of those programs, to make sure that we're best meeting the needs of the kids in the programs that we have that we already offer.
Anything to add to that panel? Thanks, Dr. Sharp. The next question, there's two of them that are very similar, almost verbatim questions. And this question is about land that we already own or not own in Lee Summit, and Kyle, this might be appropriate for you. The question is it true that you already purchased land and or identified a location for a fourth high school and middle school? The second question is similar. Any plans for building a fourth high school or remodeling, relocating Lee Summit High School?
Yes, the district does own land. We have a 20-acre
property on the northeast corner of Colburn and 7 Highway. And that was originally purchased for an elementary school. And we also own a 51-acre parcel of land that is on the south side of Bailey between Branson and Hamlin Road. So if you get kind of oriented with that, the old Bailey Farm, south of Home Depot. Those two properties, and that was originally intended for a middle school. Those two properties at this time with our CFMP process, they're just up in the air. We've got to figure out the right direction to go. It's property that could be really used for any purpose right now. We have not, and really haven't even looked at potential sites for a 4th high school. And also in addition, there is no construction right now on any new facility being built in the school district. I've heard numerous times about facilities that are being constructed that we don't know about. So that's the story of land in the district.
Thanks, Kyle. One of the things we also wanted to do, that's not a specific question here, but we wanted to kind of gauge the audience. So to know who you are, one of the things we're going to do is raise your hand if you're a pre-K parent. You're a parent of a pre-K student. Okay, hello. How about an elementary parent in the audience? Good evening. Thanks for being here. How about a middle school parent? High school parents? Great. Teachers, staff in the district? Awesome. And Michigan Board of Education, how about alumni in the audience? Great. And then students. Oh, are you? All right, great. Okay, we'll get things for you to kind of test and see who is here to get a gauge of the audience tonight. This next question is a wonderful question, and I think Dr. Miller, it's probably good for you, Kyle, Dr. Sharp as well. The question is, Summit High School is highly visible on 50 Highway and is the town's front porch. Could we reimagine and modernize its facade?
I appreciate the question, and I think that's the whole purpose of this process. Garner input, your ideas as we start to really envision how we want to move forward. You know, one of the nice things that Rick shared through his presentation is we really need to look at facilities comprehensively across the district. There's needs across the district, and how do we address those? So I think that would be something that through this process that we would consider.
I like it. The front porch, that was in quotes. All right, this next question is about residential planning, so I think, Rick, this might be appropriate for you. And the question is, are you working with the city to plan for or manage new residential development and the increase in student population?
Certainly, and as you probably know, the Lee Summit School District actually serves parts of 5 different jurisdictions plus Jackson County. So we're not only working with City of Lee Summit, part of my annual routine when I come here is to meet with the planning departments and sometimes city managers in each one of those jurisdictions, so we know what they know. And they'll share with me what's called pre-application. So things that people are thinking about that haven't even really happened yet. There's no final plan in place. So I guess the short answer is, yeah, we are working very hard to stay in step with what is being planned for the future in terms of development.
And just a quick reminder, I know that he's kind of cutting out there. Panelists, make sure you hold the mic pretty close to your mouth and pretty evenly so that we don't cut out and we can hear your answers. Thanks, appreciate it. No, I don't want to admonish. I love your answer. It was really good. I just want to make sure that everybody can hear it. Wonderful. Okay, the next question is about resources and where would money come from. So Dr. Miller, this might be appropriate for you. David with DLRs is a good question for you as well. There's 2 in this area. A lot of very cool ideas were shown on how to improve learning environments, but these ideas vary from where we currently are and seem expensive. Where will the money come from? The second question, what resources might be allocated to revamp learning spaces for future-ready learning? So around resources, where will the money come from? Very cool ideas.
So really it boils down to where we land on recommendations, and that will determine the scope of the cost. When we're talking about future-ready learning, are we looking at a specific site? Are we looking at small areas within schools? I mean, that really goes back to the scope of the work. Would really depend on what the cost would be. When we look at our bonding capacity as a district, our assessed valuation as a district, we're at about $2 billion. We have $300 million as our bonding capacity limit, with an available $160 million in bonding capacity that we could access available. We would not expect to go out and ask for anything. However, we would have the ability to do some really meaningful work in our facilities.
And I certainly appreciate the question because I think a lot of you may hear about districts elsewhere building new facilities and teachers move in and they don't even know how to teach in these spaces. There's been a disconnect between the planning process and what's happening in the district teaching and learning level. And the beautiful thing about this process and working with the district leadership is that those two are really being married together hand in glove. So everything is intentional. Both DLR Group and Gould Evans, we do a lot of renovations. You'll learn to be very resourceful with what's there, not just to save cost, but to save legacy. This was some of your older schools. So again, it's not putting in a lot of wow factor for the sake of being trendy. It's really intended to leverage what's happening in the district's teaching and learning level and to maximize those opportunities for students. So we believe it's worth investing in the future of our students. But we certainly want to be prudent about it.
Thank you both. This next question is about equity, and Ms. Smith, I think this is a very appropriate question for you. The question is, does the equity also include the needs of students with special education needs? Again, does the equity also include the needs of students with special education needs?
Absolutely. We value all of our students' learning needs, and especially students with special needs. And so students who have special needs have IEPs, and so no matter where they are, those written plans will be honored. And in a space of engagement with our community, this is a great time to tell us what it is that you feel that are needed in terms of resources, access, and aligning talent with opportunity as well. And so all of the things, referring back to the very first question, in terms of the different opportunities that exist through curriculum, through pathways, we want that for all students. It's not one student over another student, but each student in terms of our mission.
Great, thank you, Dawn. The next question, possibly Kyle, Burrell, Dr. Miller, this is a great question for you. And the question is, how important is geographical location going to be versus meeting capacity needs? So again, how important is geographical location going to be versus meeting capacity needs?
Geographical location is important. There are many factors when you look at school locations. Of course, transportation cost factors in, but also the notion of community and future-ready learning, as we talked about. We want kids to feel a part of a community, to have the best access to their schools that they can through the different types of transportation that are available. So, arterial roads, highways, different things like that really factor into the geographical location of sites and how they're chosen.
Thank you, Kyle. This question, I think we tried to answer in the presentation portion, and I'll take a shot at this, but the question is, who's on the team making the recommendations? So we talked about the CFMP team a little bit, as a variety of people from the community, from parents to teachers to students to business team members to parents and alumni and those larger community stakeholders who might have graduates in the district and maybe senior citizens who have a vested interest in being in the community for a long time. So again, trying to address the variety of folks in the community who have input and decision-making abilities throughout the process. This question, I think, for Dr. Sharp, Dr. Kephart, and possibly Rick, talking about development, subdivisions, and specific schools in general. The question is, with the expansion of Eagle Creek and the other subdivisions in the south,
in the development of Whispering Woods and other new subdivisions in the southern region, what steps are being taken to prevent overcapacity in the future for schools like Hawthorne and Lee Summit West?
That is really why we're here, is as we are looking at a plan through this process, we're looking not just at a plan that will help 2 years down the road or 4 years down the road, but we're really looking at the future of our students. So whatever changes we're having are there for a significant amount of time. And as we're having those conversations about future ready, it's preparing our students for what that looks like in the future. So making sure that they are in a place that they have enough space and enough capacity is important as we go through this process. And we don't have the answers to that yet. That's why your opinion and your feedback matters tonight.
But I do feel like we have excellent about where growth is occurring and about how much we can expect where and when. So it's just a matter of putting the meat on the bones now and figuring out how we want to service that need. And since there isn't a plan, we can't tell you, exactly how it will be addressed at this point. But we're obviously aware of the capacity implications of those developments that you're talking about. Eagle Creek has been a fantastic project. I mean, it's grown and grown. It's almost built out, but as someone pointed out, there's 2 more projects coming along the way. So we know that southwest corner of the district is going to need some help coming up. We just haven't decided exactly what that help's going to look like.
Thanks. Dr. Kephart, this is a comment. I'm going to direct it at you, and then you can maybe expand upon it. I think it's a comment and a compliment. The comment is, Meadow Lane put in a collaborative space based on student input from a trip to a Liberty school that already had this type of space. Thank you for doing that. It fosters ownership and communication, very progressive.
It is a wonderful space and one that the students actually developed, and like was mentioned, was developed after visiting a couple other schools, and that is something that we are continuing to do in all of our schools, specifically on the elementary route. You would see in each of our elementary schools, you would see examples of collaborative spaces, not necessarily as student ownership in the development of, like Meadow Lanes that just opened in the last month, but you will see in our classrooms, you will see barn doors that teachers utilize some co-teaching methods, some personalized learning methods. You will see a variety of different types of seats for students. Rarely in an elementary school do you see desks in every single school. You certainly don't see desks in rows like you saw in some of the pictures. So we are working already on some of that future-ready learning in the seating that students have a choice to be able to be a part of. And then how do we expand that learning outside of the classroom as the instruction occurs and as that collaboration occurs with students.
Great comment. Thank you to whoever submitted that. Appreciate that. The next question, I think, Ms. Dawn Smith, will be appropriate for you. And the question is, with so much focus on equity, where will the focus be on sensitivity to each school's own culture, unique to the school area, where it is not equal to or similar to another? How can we be sure we are fostering an environment that helps each unique school's culture and kids when the focus is so much on equitability?
Great question. So we have an instructional plan, and of course it outlines 3 goals. Equity being one of them, student achievement being one of them, but also well-being across the school district. Fostering a high-performing school culture and environment is of importance. We teach acceptance, but I tell you what, in coming here today and listening and focusing on engagement with the community, we have an opportunity to create spaces that delve into collaborative environments for kids. Those spaces allow kids to interact with one another. They build relationships with their teachers. They're up, they're talking, they're inviting, and we create those spaces for all types of learners. Equity is just a part of that. It's adaptive leadership. It's adaptive teaching, giving students what they need at the time that they need it.
In the question, I heard equity and I heard equal. And one of the things we've been working kind of hard to clarify is that when we're equitable, not everything is equal. Those are actually two different things. Some schools might have a higher ELL population and need more resource spaces. Some schools might have some higher special needs students and need more spaces for those students in order to provide equitable learning to all those students. So not every school is intended to look the same in a manner of being equal, but equity is defined by the needs of the local population, even to the local culture.
Thank you, David and Dawn. The next question, we've kind of been getting at it through the themes of boundaries. And this question, Dr. Miller, Kyle, David, might be appropriate for you. I understand that the changes in the facility design will impact the capacity of the schools, but the overcapacity at Lee Summit West is not going to be resolved by merely changing the classrooms. Please address comment on the boundary changes anticipated.
Well, there's no doubt that the learning environment at Lee Summit West is impacted by the number of kids that are in the building. And it's also impacted by the fact that those kids in that building don't have the level of choice that students in our other buildings do, just purely because of the course offerings and the number of students. And so that's why we're here talking. You know, that is not equitable, in our opinion, for the students that are at West. And so, you know, we're sensitive to that. That's why we're getting feedback. We're talking with the community, trying to find the best way to deal with an equitable learning environment at West. And in fact, you know, future-ready learning, it can take capacity away from a building. It can also increase capacity. It really depends on the configuration. But as I mentioned earlier, it's more of an evaluation of the quality of the space, and potentially an evaluation that's based on square foot per student, not on just number of desks in a classroom. So we really have a lot of work to do to get through, you know, how that future-ready portion impacts the capacity of the building as we move forward.
All right, thanks, Kyle. The next question is a question about busing kids into the district. So possibly Dr. Miller's might be appropriate for you to answer. The question is, are students bused in from other cities? And if so, are their numbers taken into account when rezoning?
No, at this time there's no other students being bused in from other districts, so that's not part of our consideration. Oh, correction, MIC. We do have students that pay tuition to attend MIC and STA, so thank you for the correction.
Thanks for the clarification. Thanks, Dr. Miller. All right, this question is about giving kids choices in quotes and about their learning capability around choices. So the question by Dr. Kephart, Dr. Sharp, Don Smith, the question is a comment, not a question, but I want to respond to the comment. Giving kids choices, how does this make sense? The real world involves discipline and recognizing not everything is fun. They still need to acquire basic skills, whether they choose it or not. An important skill is resilience in the face of adversity, not creating the expectation that the world has to bend to their whims. I did not see that in your lists.
Okay, thank you. When you start, the way I view that, sorry, I was talking to the panel instead of talking to the team. The way I do that, when you start talking about student choice, we spend a great deal of time, from the times that our students are, you know, I'll start from what I know, 7th grade through 12th grade, we spend a great deal of time working with them, trying to get them to feel where it is that they want to be, through Navigants, through surveys, through advisory, through those things, because student choice is a huge part of today's vernacular when it comes to education. Now, the biggest piece for us on that, like I mentioned earlier, is the honoring. What I mean by student choice is that the opportunity for them to be able to get where they need to be. Kids are pretty shrewd observers of adult behavior. They really want to work in specific environments. They really want different things. The world is much different. Like I said earlier, I mentioned earlier, 300 plus courses really provides an on-ramp and an area for kids to go and to be able to choose what it is that they need to be able to do. The world of work has changed quite a bit. Everything has changed for them, and the world that they're going into and stuff. So I do agree with some of the questions that there are some things that employers are telling us when our kids, because here's the biggest goal for us. We want them to leave well-staged. When I say well-staged, when you look at the profile of a graduate and leave Summit, they're well-staged for either college acceptance or it's career and workforce piece like that. So that's where that's at. So we want them to leave that way. But it does tell us, we do listen to the data, we do read. And what it says, they talk about those soft skills, those things that students need to be able to get where they need to be able to get to succeed in today's environment. Yes, go ahead.
So when you think about future-ready learning, it's really intended for problem-based learning, right? And so when we're talking about risk and resilience, that's really the purpose of problem-based learning. Kids have to take a real-world problem, they have to take risk, and there's absolutely learning through failure, through that model of learning. And so that's part of what we're trying to infuse, and it's a very powerful experience for kids.
I would say one of those examples, especially looking at elementary, so many foundational skills that students need, like learning how to read, to be able to move on to the rest of their life. Those skills are absolutely critical and will continue. We have learning targets from our state that will continue to be that same. We've talked a little bit about the how and the what. The what is the instruction and the learning targets that are the foundation and the core of what we teach. It's the how that's the exciting part. It's the how that's the problem-based learning. It's the how that a teacher infuses how to engage that child. Dr. Collier talked about the water cycle. You can show your knowledge of the water cycle in so many different ways. So how does each child want to be able to show that they have that information? So it is critical to have those foundational skills, and on top of that, have the choice in how to show some of that knowledge.
Beautiful. All right, this question I think is wonderful. Again, Dr. Kephart, Dr. Miller, Dr. Sharp. This question says, following Maslow's hierarchy for student needs, how will the district ensure basic and fundamental needs like food, clothing, shelter, safety for all students? Or does that only pertain to a school?
That's a great question, and is one that our schools, every single one of them, has professionals that are in the building that focus on student needs, and those are the first needs that we focus on. We want students to be able to learn each and every day, but to be able, it's the bottom tier of Maslow's hierarchy. So we have schools in our community that our community supports our schools. We have back snacks in our schools that provide food, and that's in all of our elementary schools that provide food for the weekend for some of our families. We have school liaisons that help support other community resources, and that is in every single one of our schools. So as we focus on student achievement and equity, we also absolutely focus on those student needs that we have, and how can we continue to do that, certainly in a place called Lee Summit that has an amazing community support for each of our schools.
All right, we're going to have time for one more question. We're getting close to our time, so we'll wrap up on this question. I like this question because it's been a theme through all of the engagement series that we've had this week. Dr. Miller, how do you test out a space, and maybe David, you as well, how do you test out a space design for a future environment that is not known? In other words, how do we know if the proposed changes are future ready? Is it only to be flexible? And the other way was, are we a science experiment?
That's a great question. I will say that we have to give a lot of credit to our teachers. We have teachers that are pushing the edge with future-ready learning, flexible furniture in their classrooms. They're finding a way to make that happen. Dr. Collier mentioned the word multiplier, and that's what we're trying to do. We're seeing great instructional practices, and how do we multiply that across the district so that more kids have the opportunity for that.
David, anything to add on DLR's part about trending and the future of what you're seeing? We don't have a mic. There we go. All right. Now you have 3.
Perfect. Well, the point that there are what we're referring to as lighthouses within the district, schools that are really killing it right now. They're doing great things, are being looked at very carefully by the entire master planning team to understand why they're working well and what they're doing. We'll probably continue to explore pilot learning spaces to kind of put some of these spaces into practice. It's something that we did on the Missouri Innovation Campus as well, to build spaces that teachers can test drive and share among different cohorts and different subject areas to make sure that they are supporting the teaching and learning strategies being developed by district leadership. So it's not a field of dreams where we build these fancy new schools and teachers will get it. Again, it's very much strategic and intentional to what we know works.
I can add too that the district is involved with an organization called the Association for Learning Environments. They're an international group that supports innovative learning ideas, and we have for years, there are quarterly meetings around the metro area alone where we meet at facilities that are innovative, that are trying new things. We share successes and failures both because we've got to learn from each other. But we are definitely not at all on the bleeding edge of this. This is going on in every district that we've visited. We have been to Liberty, North Kansas City, Shawnee Mission, Olathe, Blue Valley. We're going to Belton next month. There's just districts everywhere who are really reaching for solutions for these future learning problems.
Great, thank you to the panel for answering those questions. Wonderfully done. You heard tonight some real key messaging around this idea of there's no preconceived notions and there's really a blank slate in this opportunity for us to imagine the future of Lee Summit schools. So I hope that really resonated with you tonight. I hope you learned a little bit more about future-ready learning, about capacity, about boundaries, and I hope that your questions were answered. And again, those that were not, we'll track those on the website for you with answers. So the next portion of our evening, we're at our time, is an opportunity for you to have a gallery walk and go see some of the boards, talk with us personally.
I just got to say something, because...
And typically started, we had an opportunity...
Very quick comment. It's a community conversation.
Sure, and we want to
we haven't
process...
had a conversation. We've had tweets that you guys have answered, basically what it amounted to, but we've had no conversation. We've mentioned conversation, collaboration, and all the buzzwords about how to deal with students, but we haven't done it here. And all I'm saying before we leave, next time we have this meeting and we've taken our evening and our time to be here, to actually have conversation, maybe cut those presentations down to half of what they were, so we can actually speak to you guys and actually have follow-up questions.
Great, thank you for your comments, we appreciate that. And the intent of the evening was to go through a process and have the comment cards to answer this in a really structured environment so that we could access a variety of questions for the audience. So again, thank you for coming tonight. We hope that the education portion and the presentation portion was informative, and as we lay the groundwork going forward for the rest of the engagement series, this is a basis to help make those decisions and recommendations in conjunction with you and with your feedback. So again, thank you for being here. The gallery walk is available to have personal conversations with any of us outside in the hallway and answering more questions that you might have. Again, thanks for being here. We appreciate you.